Hey everybody, how's it going? Blaine, aka Thrifty Fishing here, back at you again with another collective video. We're gonna look at the art editor. I'm gonna talk a lot about what it can do, some of the tricks you need to know if you're gonna be using the art editor and stuff like that. So just to get started, we'll look at the draw tool really quick. So the draw tool's very basic, very simple. Um, not to hate on the game or anything, but when people ask me how the draw tool works, I'm like, it's just like a worse version of MS Paint. So you have just a standard color picker here. Any hexadecimal code you have, you can use. You can actually change it if you like use RGB or whatever, but I think hexadecimal works fine. Um, so you can pick your color. If you have a specific hexadecimal color that you want, you can do that. And then you basically pick the size of your stroke, and you can draw with it. So that's pretty simple. As far as other things that the draw tool can do, I haven't found a use for it yet. I'm sure there is one, but you can turn on the shadow here, which gives it a shadow um, on each side, and then you can offset the shadow by however much amount, and then it kind of gives you like a following trace there, which I mean looks cool. Like I said, it's just I haven't needed it for anything yet. So that's something. Fun fact, if you want to grab or move any of your drawings, you have to click on the image tab. If you try to click on it from the draw tab, you're just going to draw again. So make sure you click on the image tab if you want to move your stuff. That's it's one of the first things you have to learn. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this shadow off. Another thing about this is that you have a transparency slider. This is kind of a new feature. We haven't always had the transparency slider. And so like I can come in here with this transparent green, and it might be kind of hard to tell at the moment that it's transparent because there's nothing behind it. But if I come in with another layer, you can start to see that you can see through it and that it is indeed transparent. We can stack layers there. If we want a more blue transparent color, we can certainly grab that. And as you can see through it. It's kind of thick, but you can see through it, and you can certainly make it as light or as dark as you'd prefer. And so those are just a couple of the things with the drawing tool. And when it comes to the drawing tool, that's pretty much it. You can add a shadow, you can make it transparent. That's the gist of it. Now, you can edit your drawings in other ways, and I'll go over that in just a second. So for the sake of this, I'm just going to draw a very basic, not transparent shape here. So let's just draw us a circle. 10 out of 10, that perfect circle right there. Obviously no rough edges or anything on this circle. Alright, perfect circle there. So like I said, switch to this image tab, and then you can click on it and you can draw it. So you can resize any of your drawings. And you might think, oh, well, I can add filters to my drawings. Well, you actually can't add filters to your drawings, but there's a trick around that. So let's say you've drawn your circle and you want to play around with some filters. Well, there's this button that says Imagify here. So you click on the thing that you want to add filter to. You click Imagify, and boom, now we have an image version of our drawing. So we take this image here. We can stretch it just like we can our drawing, but now you'll see that all of the filters are unlocked. So that sepia tone that you really wanted to add to it, you can add. You will notice there's a weird thing here that it does where it likes to rotate things when you add a filter, which is bizarre, but it's still the same shape. It just might spin it a little bit. And it doesn't always do that, but sometimes it does. We'll get that fixed one day. Other than that, you also have a bunch of sliders down here like brightness. We can down the brightness, we can up the brightness, we can blur it. The blur tool is really cool. It basically just stretches it out within the square of the image here. Pixelate's pretty neat if you want to do some really low res drawing there. And then the one that I probably use more than anything is the blend color tool down here. So if you check this box, then there's all kinds of ways you can change the color. So tint basically lets you just lay a different color on top of it. So whatever color you pick here, it's going to change the entire color to that color. Multiply is similar, but it basically mixes it with the color below it. So we do a bright blue, we get like a dark purple, so on and so forth. Add is, I guess, more so of what I just said. It's like less blended, and it works different on white objects. And then there's subtract, which doesn't do anything because there's no blue in there to take out, and so on and so forth. But they each work in slightly different ways, but very simple things. So these are all things you can do to your drawing. You can change the gamma levels, and change the colors, which just doesn't work so well on a solid red object, of course. But let's say you've drawn something like, let's say that this is not a circle, but it is an apple. So we take our apple here, we give it a stem, we're going to give it a little leaf. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to come over here and take the apple. We're going to give it a little bit of a shine. Oh, look at that. Doesn't that look great? But now all these things are separate pieces. And so we can't edit them like we could with the Imagify tool because we could only copy one at a time. So there's this other tool here that says flatten everything. So we do that. Everything on the palette now has become an image of its own. So now we can modify this with the filters just like a single object that we had imagified. So we take our apple, we can click on it, we can emboss it, we can blend color on it. And now it applies to the whole drawing. So we can sepia the drawing, we can brownie the drawing, we can black and white the drawing, anything like that. And you can do this at any step. So flattening also helps you, like if you've got a lot of brush strokes, if you have a lot of complex stuff on your drawing, it helps you reduce that by flattening it into one simple image that you can move around. It'll increase your load time a whole lot. Also works great for like doing a background, and you can have the background be a separate piece. So like if we're wanting to do like a skyline and some hills real quick, make sure I don't have transparency on. Do not. Okay. So we can come over here and give ourselves a sky. Sorry, I'm trying to draw quick here. Don't actually have to fill this bottom in, but I am. Drag this over to green real quick. Oh, I had black. There we go. And just give ourselves some hills here. Very simple, very basic hills here. And maybe we want ourselves a sun in the sky. A very menacing, evil red sun here. Perfect. So we've drawn our background. Now we can go ahead and flatten that. And we won't have to worry about anything with our background. We can go ahead, we can change the color of our background separately. And we can use it just like a clip art. We can adjust the brightness. If we need to make it a little scarier, we can turn down that contrast and turn down that darkness. So that's really, really simple stuff that you can do to do more with your drawings. You can texture things. It's basically like the basics of drawing. Now I'll show you some cool tricks that you can do. So let's say you want to give something a texture. There's a couple of things you can do to achieve that effect. So let's say this object, we want to give some texture to it. We're going to come down to filters. First I need to imagify it. I'm not following my own tutorial here. So we've got the thing that we want to add our texture to. So we can come down here to noise, and we can generate some noise on there. And the higher you turn it, the less you're going to be able to see the cleanness of it. So I mean, this right here is just a fine texture tool by itself. You can see that it generates like different grains the more you do it there. And you can combine it with the blur tool to achieve even different textures. And so you can use those back and forth. You can also use the pixelate tool, but notice that your edges are going to be a little rougher. when you're mixing that with the tool, and then you can once again come in with the blur tool to kind of smooth it all out. But yeah, so that's a couple of ways to get texture. You've got the emboss tool, which basically gives you like a metallic engraving of it. It changes the color a little bit. You can also combine that with the noise, and it gives you, once again, a different texture. This is how I did the stalking adder, like green skin. I did it with the emboss noise trick here. And yeah, so that's how you can add texture to something that you drew without having to go in and shade everything individually. In addition to that, there's a couple of tricks you can do with clip art if you're wanting to do stuff like backgrounds and whatnot. One that I've done in other videos is show people how to make a floor. I learned this trick from Lucko, so shout out to Lucko for this. But so a box, normally we can only stretch it in right angles, either up and down here or these corners, which just makes it bigger. And so if you want like a skewed room, you can't make that happen with clip art. But if you turn this to its angle, I cannot speak English tonight. If you turn it to an angle and then hit Imagify, we'll get a new image where, well, I said we would. Have they patched the Imagify? Okay, there it is. Whew. I thought we had lost our trick for a second. I was worried. So now you can see that the four corners are on the sides now. So when we stretch it, we actually skew this angle. And that's awesome because that lets us do like a backdrop, a ground that's like coming to a corner. So just really quick. And you work the filters the same way you do this, like I showed you on your own drawings. You can just tint it whatever color. So this is our, green floor, whatever. And now we can create ourselves a wall and just move it behind. So you've got these tools down here, backwards and frontwards. They work just like any other program. Move it to the back. All right. And then we've got ourselves another one. Do this corner right here. I'm going to come over here and actually darken this one a little bit so that we can tell it's a different wall. And then move it to the back. And boom. Now we've got a backdrop for our picture. So I could come in here, and draw something now. I could use the flatten everything tool to go ahead and make this, just one background image. And then I can come back to the draw and, if I wanted to put a man standing in this room, I could certainly do that. So that's one little trick that's really simple. Helps you get a backdrop going, because a backdrop can be pretty hard. Let's see, what's another trick? So if you want to do a cool lighting effect, this is one that I do, I won't say all the time, but I do it pretty frequently. You can just grab yourself like a yellow color here and tint your object that. And this one works great. You can see it's got like these three sound markers coming out of this megaphone. Then we're just going to stretch it really big. This is going to look weird at first. You got to stick with me. Alright, so we've got these three marks here. I'm going to stretch it down just a little bit so we can actually see all three of them. Here we go. And now we're going to come over here to our blur tool. And when we blur these, we can get a lighting effect. We've got this light coming from a central point over here. And so now we've got a room with these light beams coming down. It's just another simple trick you can do. You can do a lot of fun stuff with the blur tool and objects that don't fill up their square. And what I mean by that, let me show you. Like, where are the worms at? So you can see worms here. They have a lot of empty space. Let me color these so you can actually see them. They have a lot of empty space. So when you blur them, they fill in all this empty space. So like if you just want to add like a weird, almost kind of like spooky tint over something, you can use the worms here. And then you start blurring them up. And you see you get like this almost fog effect where it's under like a haze now created by those worms. So that's something really cool that you can do. Another awesome thing that is also the blur tool is that any of these objects you can give an outline to. I'll show you how to do that right now. Let's use this wolf head here. I'm going to go ahead and color it so that we can actually see it. So I'm not going to use tint. I'm going to use multiply, and I'll show you why. If you use the blur tool, alright, and we stretch it up just a little bit, and then come back down, you'll see that it forms this black outline around it, like this. And if you tint that, it will completely get rid of that. And if you multiply it, then it will leave the black outline. And even cooler than that is if you add, it will actually just tint the outline. So let's say we want this to be a logo on our wall. We can actually use that skew trick again, where we turn it slantways here, imagify it. Now we can stretch it and stick it on our wall here. And go ahead and flatten it. Boom, now that's part of our wall. So that's something you can do. The blur tool is a really useful thing once you figure out all the cool stuff that you can do with it. Those lighting effects, like I said, there's all kinds of stuff you can use for that, not just that one that I used. You can make lighting effects with basically any long pointy object, like for instance this needle right here. We can use just that needle to get a single beam of light coming down if we want to. So let's say that our light source is coming from off the top over here. Now we come in here to our filters. Once again, we just blur it up. We come over here, we pick tint, give ourselves, like a yellow light, make it a little wider than that. And now we've got this light coming down from somewhere else, and you can play with it. You can get it as sharp or as fine as you want, or as blurry as you want it. So yeah, that's pretty much the tricks of the trade when you're using the art editor. I can't think of anything else off the top of my head right now that will help you. Basic shapes wise, the blank squares first, and then you got to go to the P's for plane for some reason. But once you get there, you've got the circle, another square. So those are your basic shapes. And yeah, so I hope that was helpful for you guys. I'll see you again next time, and thanks for tuning in.